Some moments don't ask for permission. They arrive bleeding, broken, and desperate, and they force a choice that can never be undone. One night, I found a stranger collapsed in the dark, his life slipping away with every shallow breath. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his past. I only knew that if I walked away, he would die. So I stayed. Help. And in that single act of mercy, I unknowingly crossed a line that separated my old life from everything that came after. Because the man I saved was no ordinary stranger. He was a mafia boss, powerful, feared, and surrounded by a world I was never meant to enter. Saving his life didn't make me a hero. It made me visible. Overnight, the quiet life I knew vanished, replaced by loyalty tests, silent warnings, and protection that felt more like a cage than a gift. This is the story of how one decision changed who I was allowed to be. And why walking away was never an option again. The power had been out for 3 hours when I heard the crash outside. Not the usual city noise, trash cans tipping, cats fighting, but something heavier, something human. I froze at the kitchen table, my hand still gripping the candle I'd been about to light. Mia sat across from me, her math homework half finished in the flickering shadows. She was 8 years old and too smart for her own good. She'd already learned to recognize the sounds that meant danger. "Mom!" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Stay here." I stood slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The crash came again, closer this time. Right outside our building's service entrance. The one everyone ignored because the lock had been broken for months, and the landlord never fixed anything unless you threatened to call the city. I crept to the window and pulled back the edge of the curtain. The street was dark, every apartment building on the block swallowed by the blackout. But in the weak moonlight I saw him. A man sprawled across the concrete steps leading down to the basement entrance. His white shirt was black with blood. His hand pressed against his side, trying to hold something inside that wasn't supposed to come out. I dropped the curtain and stepped back. My first thought was simple and selfish. Not my problem. Close the curtain. Go back to the table. Pretend I saw nothing. But then he moved. His head turned toward my window, and even through the glass and the darkness, I felt his eyes find mine. I should have called 911. That's what normal people did when they found someone bleeding on their street. But I'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know better. The ambulance would take 40 minutes if they came at all. The police would ask questions I couldn't afford to answer. Questions about why I was still awake at midnight. Why is my 8-year-old daughter still doing homework instead of sleeping? Why did we live in a building with a broken service entrance and a landlord who accepted cash only? And if the wrong people saw the ambulance arrive, if they realized someone had survived whatever had put that man on my steps, they'd come back to finish the job. They'd see my face. They'd remember my apartment number. They'd know about Mia. I looked at my daughter. She'd put down her pencil and was watching me with those dark, serious eyes that made her look older than 8. Eyes that had already seen too much. "Is someone hurt?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Stay inside. Lock the door behind me. If anything happens, if you hear anything strange, you go into the bathroom and you hide in the tub. Understand?" "Mom, don't." "Mia." I knelt in front of her and took both her hands. "Promise me." She bit her lip, but she nodded. "I promise." I grabbed the old first aid kit from under the sink. It was barely more than Band-Aids and expired aspirin, but it was all I had. Then I took the flashlight from the junk drawer, tested it once to make sure the batteries still worked, and headed for the door. The service entrance stank of old garbage and something else. Something metallic and wrong. Blood. The man was still conscious when I reached him, but barely. His breathing came in short, harsh gasps. His hand was still pressed against his side, but blood seeped between his fingers, dark and thick. "I'm going to help you," I said, keeping my voice low. "But you can't make noise. Do you understand?" His eyes opened. They were gray, cold as winter rain, and sharp despite the pain. He studied my face for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Surprise. I couldn't tell. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. His voice was rough but educated. Not the voice of a street fighter or a desperate thief. Neither should you. I knelt beside him and moved his hand away from the wound. The flashlight beam revealed a deep gash just below his ribs. Knife wound, clean and deliberate. This needs stitches. A hospital. No hospital. You'll bleed out. Then I'll bleed out. His gray eyes locked onto mine. But no hospital. No police. I'd heard those words before. From my ex-husband, back when the bruises on my arms were still fresh and the excuses still came easily. From the woman upstairs who'd disappeared one night and never came back. From every person in this neighborhood who'd learned that some problems didn't get solved by calling the authorities. I opened the first aid kit. My hands were shaking, but I forced them steady. I have gauze and tape. I can try to stop the bleeding, but I don't have anything for pain. I don't need anything for pain. He leaned his head back against the concrete steps and closed his eyes. Just stop the bleeding. I tore open a package of gauze pads and pressed them against the wound. He didn't flinch. Didn't make a sound. Just kept breathing, slow and controlled like he'd done this before. It took 20 minutes to get the bleeding under control. 20 minutes of applying pressure, of replacing blood-soaked gauze with fresh pads, of watching his face for signs he was about to pass out or go into shock. He never complained. Never asked for water or help or mercy. He just watched me work with those cold gray eyes, studying me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve. You're not a nurse, he said finally. No. But you know what you're doing. My mother was sick for a long time before she died. I pressed another strip of tape across the makeshift bandage. I learned. What was your name again? I didn't tell you my name. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Smart. I packed up the first aid kit and stood. My knees ached from kneeling on concrete, and my hands were sticky with his blood. You need real medical attention. This won't hold for long. It'll hold long enough. He tried to sit up and failed. His face went pale and sweat broke out across his forehead. Help me stand. You can't walk. You've lost too much blood. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. No, he said quietly. They don't. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the alley entrance. Car pulled up, sleek and black and completely silent. The door opened and two men stepped out. They moved like soldiers. Fast, efficient, dangerous. They saw me immediately, and their hands went to their waists. To guns, I realized. They were carrying guns. Don't, the injured man said. His voice cut through the darkness like a blade. She helped me. The two men froze. One of them, tall with a scar running down his left cheek, stepped closer to the injured man and knelt. Sir, we need to move. Now. I know. The injured man let them lift him to his feet. He swayed but didn't fall. His gray eyes found mine one last time. Go inside. Lock your door. Don't come out until morning. Then they were gone, loading him into the black car and pulling away into the darkness. No sirens. No flashing lights. No evidence they'd ever been here except for the blood on the concrete steps and the blood on my hands. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence. Then I turned and went back inside. Mia was waiting by the door, her face pale in the candlelight. Is he okay? I don't know. I locked the door behind me and checked it twice. But he's gone now. It's over. I believed that when I said it. I really did. I woke to silence. Not the usual morning sounds of traffic and sirens and garbage trucks rumbling down the street. Actual silence. Heavy and wrong. I sat up in bed and listened. Nothing. The apartment was still dark, the power still out. Mia was asleep beside me, curled under the blanket we'd shared all night because her room was too cold. I'd let her stay with me after what happened, even though I knew she was too old to be sleeping in her mother's bed. I slipped out from under the covers and went to the window. The first thing I noticed was the lack of movement. Our street was always busy in the morning. People heading to work, kids walking to school, delivery trucks blocking traffic. But now the street was empty. Well, not empty. Controlled. Black cars sat at both ends of the block. Men in dark suits stood on the corners, their hands in their pockets, their eyes scanning the street like security cameras. More men were positioned outside our building, 2 at the front entrance and 2 more at the service entrance where I'd found the injured man. My stomach dropped. This wasn't protection. This was a perimeter. A knock at the door made me jump. Not a loud knock. Not aggressive. Just 3 soft taps, polite and patient. I checked the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, different from the ones on the street. Older, maybe 50, with silver hair and an expensive suit that didn't belong in this building. He looked directly at the peephole, as if he knew I was watching. "Miss Brennan," he said. His voice was calm, professional. "My name is Thomas Kane. I work for the man you helped last night. He'd like to speak with you." My hands tightened on the doorframe. "I didn't help anyone." "Yes, you did. And because of that, you and your daughter are in danger." He paused. "May I come in? Promise you're safe. But we need to talk." I didn't open the door right away. I stood there, staring at the peephole, thinking about Mia asleep in my bed and the men stationed outside and the blood on the concrete steps. "Miss Brennan," Thomas Kane said again. "I understand you're frightened. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help. I don't need help. With respect, you do. The people who attacked Mr. Costello last night are still looking for him. They'll retrace his movements. They'll find witnesses. They'll find you. I didn't see anything. You saved his life. That makes you relevant." I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the door. Every instinct I had screamed at me to keep this door closed, to protect Mia, to pretend last night never happened. But I'd lived in this city long enough to recognize a corner when I was backed into one. "Open the door." Thomas Kane was exactly as I'd imagined. Neat, controlled, professionally dangerous. He stepped inside without asking permission and glanced around the apartment. His expression didn't change, but I saw him note the water-stained ceiling, the peeling wallpaper, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. "Where's your daughter?" he asked. "Asleep. And she's staying that way." "That's fine. This won't take long." He moved to the window and looked down at the street. "How much do you know about Dominic Costello?" "Nothing. I don't even know who that is." "He's the man you saved." Thomas turned to face me. "He runs most of the organized operations in the city. Shipping, logistics, real estate. Some of it's legitimate. Most of it isn't." My throat went dry. "You're telling me I saved a criminal. I'm telling you that you saved a very powerful man. And because of that, his enemies now know you exist." Thomas Kane explained it in simple terms, like he was describing a business transaction instead of a threat to my life. The people who'd stabbed Dominic Costello were associates of a rival organization. They'd been trying to send a message, to weaken his control over the shipping routes through the city's port. They'd failed, but not because they'd missed. They'd failed because I'd stopped the bleeding. "We've been watching this area for weeks," Thomas said. "We knew something was being planned. We had people positioned nearby." He paused. "That's how we knew about you. You were watching me. We were watching everyone in a 3-block radius. Your building is adjacent to a warehouse Mr. Costello owns. You walk past it every morning on your way to work. You were documented as part of the surveillance." The room felt smaller suddenly. "Colder. For how long?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks. They'd been watching me for 6 weeks. Watching me leave for my shifts at the diner. Watching me walk Mia to school. Watching me count coins at the grocery store. Deciding between milk and eggs because I couldn't afford both. "Mr. Costello noticed you 3 weeks ago," Thomas continued. "He asked about the woman with the child who always walked quickly, who never made eye contact, who carried pepper spray in her left pocket. I don't understand. Why would he care? Because you reminded him of someone. Thomas's expression softened slightly. His sister. She was a single mother too. She died 5 years ago, and her daughter is still struggling with the loss. I thought about the injured man's gray eyes, the way he'd studied my face in the darkness. He knew who I was. Last night when I helped him. He already knew. Yes, they moved us that afternoon. Not gently, not with explanations or options, but with quiet efficiency that made it clear this wasn't up for discussion. Mia woke up confused and frightened when Thomas Kane's people began packing our things. I tried to explain, tried to make it sound normal, but she'd lived through enough upheaval in her 8 years to recognize when her mother was lying. "Where are we going?" she asked, clutching her backpack like a lifeline. "Somewhere safe." "Why?" "Because I helped someone last night. And now we need to stay somewhere else for a little while." "Because of the man with the blood." He nodded. There was no point in lying to her. She'd already seen too much. The car that picked us up was black and expensive, with tinted windows and leather seats that smelled new. Mia sat pressed against my side, silent and tense. I held her hand and watched the city slide past the windows, familiar streets giving way to neighborhoods I'd only seen in movies. We drove for 40 minutes before turning through iron gates and up a long driveway lined with trees. The house at the end wasn't a house. It was an estate, 3 stories of stone and glass set back from the road and surrounded by walls I couldn't see but knew were there. "This is where you'll stay," Thomas said as the car stopped at the front entrance. "Mr. Costello owns this property. It's secure." Mia's hand tightened in mine. "Mom, I don't like this." "I know, baby. But it's just temporary." I didn't believe that either. But I said it anyway. The room they gave us was bigger than our entire apartment. King-sized bed with white sheets that looked too clean to touch. A private bathroom with marble counters and a shower that probably used more water in 1 minute than we were supposed to use in a week. Windows that looked out over gardens I couldn't name and a pool I'd never swim in. Mia stood in the middle of the room, her backpack still on her shoulders, staring at everything like it might disappear if she looked away. "You can take your backpack off," I said gently. She shook her head. "What if we have to leave?" "Then we'll leave. But right now we're safe here." "How do you know?" I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. But I couldn't let her see that. A woman appeared in the doorway, middle-aged and kind-faced, wearing a simple gray dress. "Miss Brennan. I'm Helena. I manage the household. If you need anything, food, clothes, anything at all, just ask." "We're fine," I said automatically. "I'm sure you are. But Mr. Costello wanted me to make sure you know you're not prisoners. You're guests. Guests who can't leave." Helena's smile didn't waver. "Guests who shouldn't leave. For their own safety." After she left, Mia finally took off her backpack and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked so small in this huge room, so fragile. I sat beside her and wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. Are we in trouble?" "No, baby. We're not in trouble. We did the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing gets complicated." She leaned against me and I felt her start to cry. Silent tears that soaked into my shirt. I held her and stared at the expensive walls and thought about the man with the gray eyes who'd known my name before I'd ever touched his wound. We'd been in the estate for 3 days when I finally demanded to see Dominic Costello. Thomas Kane tried to put me off, said his employer was recovering and didn't want to be disturbed. But I was done being polite, done being compliant, done sitting in that beautiful room while my life fell apart outside these walls. "I need to go back to work," I told Thomas. "I need to pay my rent. I need to live my life. Your job and your rent have been taken care of." Without asking me. As a courtesy. I don't want courtesy. I want my life back. Thomas looked at me for a long moment. His expression unreadable. "I'll ask if he'll see you." An hour later, I was escorted to a study on the 2nd floor. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, windows overlooking the gardens. And sitting behind the desk, looking pale but alive, was Dominic Costello. He'd cleaned up since that night in the alley. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt pressed and spotless. But I could see the strain in his face, the careful way he held himself to avoid putting pressure on the wound in his side. "Miss Brennan," he said. "Please sit." I stayed standing. "I want to go home." "That's not possible right now." "Why not?" "Because the people who attacked me are still looking for witnesses. And you were seen that night." "By who?" "Your men." "By a security camera across the street. The footage was deleted, but not before it was copied." He leaned back in his chair, wincing slightly. "They know someone helped me. They're searching." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean for me?" "For my daughter. It means you're safer here." "For how long?" "Until the situation is resolved." "And when will that be?" Dominic Costello's gray eyes met mine, and I saw the truth in them even before he spoke. "I don't know. I met the girl on the 4th day. Mia and I were in the garden, trying to pretend this was a vacation instead of captivity, when I saw her watching us from an upstairs window. She was young, maybe 11 or 12, with dark hair and Dominic Costello's gray eyes." "Who's that?" Mia asked, following my gaze. "I don't know." The girl disappeared from the window. A few minutes later, she appeared at the edge of the garden, standing half hidden behind a tree. She watched us with the same intense focus her uncle had, like she was trying to decide if we were safe. I walked toward her slowly, the way you'd approach a nervous animal. "Hello." She didn't answer, just stared at me with those gray eyes. "My name's Kate. This is my daughter, Mia." Still nothing. "What's your name?" The girl's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible, "Riley." "It's nice to meet you, Riley." She looked at Mia, who waved nervously. Riley's expression didn't change. "Why are you here?" "It's complicated. Uncle Dominic says you saved his life." "I helped him. That's all." "He says you didn't have to." "I did. Anyone would have." Riley's eyes narrowed. "No, they wouldn't." She turned and walked away before I could respond, disappearing back into the house like a ghost. Helena explained it to me that night while Mia was taking a bath. Riley was Dominic Costello's niece, the daughter of his younger sister who died in a car accident 5 years ago. She'd been in the car when it happened, survived without a scratch, but something inside her had broken that night and never healed. "She doesn't talk much," Helena said quietly. "Especially not to strangers. The fact that she spoke to you at all is significant." "What happened to her father?" "He wasn't in the picture. Mr. Costello took Riley in after the accident. He's done his best, but..." Helena trailed off. "He doesn't know how to connect with her. He's not built for that kind of gentleness." I thought about the girl hiding behind the tree, watching us with those careful eyes. I knew that look. I'd seen it in Mia's face when her father left, when we'd moved into the apartment with the broken service entrance and the landlord who didn't care. The look of a child learning to expect nothing. "Where does she sleep?" "Yes. 3rd floor. East wing. But she spends most of her time alone." "Does she go to school?" "Private tutors come here. Mr. Costello doesn't think it's safe for her to leave the estate." I looked out the window at the manicured gardens, the high walls, the guards I never saw but knew were there. This wasn't a home. It was a beautiful cage. And Riley had been locked inside it for 5 years. "I'd like to spend time with her," I said. "If that's allowed." Helena smiled. "I think that would be good for both of you." Riley appeared in our room the next morning while Mia was doing her homework. She stood in the doorway, silent and watchful, until I noticed her. "Want to come in?" "Yes." She hesitated, then crossed the threshold like it took physical effort. She stood near the window, as far from us as she could get while still being in the room. Mia looked up from her math worksheet. "Hi, Riley." Riley nodded but didn't speak. "I'm working on fractions," Mia continued, like Riley's silence was normal. They're really hard. Do you like math? Another nod. Are you good at it? Small shrug. Maybe you could help me. Mia held out her worksheet, hopeful and innocent in the way only 8-year-olds could be. Riley walked over slowly and looked at the problems. She picked up Mia's pencil and wrote out the answer to the first question, her handwriting small and precise. Oh, Mia beamed. I get it now. Thanks. Riley set down the pencil and stepped back, but she didn't leave. She stayed, watching Mia work through the rest of the problems, occasionally pointing out a mistake or showing her a shortcut. I watched them from my chair by the window, something tight and painful loosening in my chest. This was the first time since we'd arrived that Mia had looked like a normal kid instead of a frightened refugee. And Riley looked almost like a normal kid too. Over the next 2 weeks, Riley started spending more time in our room. She never stayed long at first, just enough to check Mia's homework or sit quietly while we read or played simple card games. But gradually the visits got longer. She started talking more, her voice quiet but steady. I learned that she loved astronomy and hated crowds. That she used to play piano but hadn't touched one since her mother died. That she had nightmares most nights about the sound of metal crunching and glass breaking. I didn't push. Just listened. And when she asked questions about Mia, about our life before we came here, I answered honestly. I told her about the apartment with no heat and too many roaches. About working double shifts at the diner and still not having enough for Mia's school supplies. About the constant fear of losing what little we had. Why didn't you ask Uncle Dominic for help? Riley asked one afternoon. He helps people sometimes. I didn't know your uncle existed until the night I found him bleeding. But you helped him anyway. Yes. Why? Because he needed help. And I could give it. Riley was quiet for a long moment. My mom used to say that too. That you help people because you can, not because you'll get something back. Your mom was right. Uncle Dominic says that's dangerous thinking. That people will take advantage of you. Maybe. But I'd rather be taken advantage of than become someone who stops helping. Riley looked at me with those serious gray eyes. You're not like the people who work for Uncle Dominic. No. I'm not. I'm glad you're here. It was the first time she'd said anything like that. The first time she'd acknowledged that my presence meant something to her. I reached over and squeezed her hand gently. I'm glad I'm here too, I said. And I meant it. Dominic Costello started joining us for dinner in the 3rd week. It started casually. He'd be passing through the dining room when we were eating, and Helena would insist he sit down. But after the first few times, I realized it was deliberate. He wanted to see Riley interact with us. Wanted to see his niece act like a normal child instead of a ghost haunting his house. At first, Riley went silent when he appeared. She'd shrink into herself, answering his questions in monosyllables, avoiding eye contact. But Mia had no such reservations. She talked to Dominic like he was a regular person, asking him about his work, vague answers, his hobbies, reading, and whether he'd ever been to the ocean. Yes, many times. Mia loves the ocean, I said one evening. We used to take the bus out to the beach on her birthday. Used to? Dominic asked. It got too expensive. Between the fare and the food and... I stopped myself. It doesn't matter. But something shifted in Dominic's expression. That evening he called Thomas Kane into the study. The next morning a car was waiting to take us to a private beach house an hour north of the city. This is too much, I told Dominic. It's a beach. Not a kingdom. You know what I mean. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than calculation in his eyes. My sister used to take Riley to the beach every summer. She hasn't been since the accident. Maybe it's time. Riley stood at the water's edge for 20 minutes before she stepped into the surf. Mia splashed beside her, laughing and shrieking at the cold waves. And when Riley finally smiled, really smiled wide and genuine, Dominic Costello's entire face changed. He looked human, vulnerable, real. Thank you. he said quietly, standing beside me on the sand. For what? For giving her this. I didn't do anything. You brought us here. But you made her want to come. He paused. She hasn't laughed like that in 5 years. I watched the girls play in the water, their voices carrying on the wind. She's a good kid. She just needs to remember how to be one. You're good with children. I'm good with Mia. That's all I know. You're good with Riley too. She trusts you. She shouldn't trust anyone too easily. Not in your world. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. No, she shouldn't. The violence came back into my life on a Tuesday. I'd been lulled into a false sense of safety by 3 weeks of routine. Mornings with the girls, afternoons in the garden, evenings with Dominic joining us for dinner. Felt almost normal, almost safe. Then Thomas Kane knocked on my door at 2 in the morning. Get Riley and Mia, he said. Take them to the safe room in the basement. Don't ask questions. Don't hesitate. Go now. I moved without thinking, years of survival instinct kicking in. I woke both girls, told them to stay quiet, and followed Thomas through the dark house. The safe room was exactly what it sounded like. Reinforced walls, no windows, a heavy steel door that locked from the inside. Stay here until someone comes for you, Thomas said. Don't open the door for anyone except me, Helena, or Mr. Costello. What's happening? We have a situation. Then he was gone, and I was alone in the safe room with 2 frightened children and the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. We stayed there for 6 hours. Mia cried. Riley didn't. She just sat against the wall, her knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. I held them both and listened to the silence beyond the door and tried not to imagine what was happening upstairs. When the door finally opened, it was Dominic. His shirt was torn, blood, not his I hoped, splattered across his chest. He looked at Riley first, his eyes scanning her face to make sure she was unharmed. Then he looked at me. It's over, he said. You're safe. What happened? Someone tried to send a message. They failed. What kind of message? He didn't answer. He just held out his hand to Riley. Come on. Let's get you back upstairs. Riley took his hand and let him lead her out. But when she looked back at me, I saw something new in her eyes. Fear. Of the violence. Of the world her uncle lived in. Of the realization that safety was always temporary. I found Dominic in his study that night, a glass of whiskey in his hand and exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Riley won't sleep, I said from the doorway. Every time she closes her eyes, she panics. I'll have the doctor prescribe something. She doesn't need pills. She needs to feel safe. She is safe. No, she's not. And neither are we. I stepped into the room. Who came here tonight? Who tried to hurt us? That's not your concern. It is when it involves my daughter. When it involves Riley. Dominic set down his glass and looked at me. The people who attacked me 3 weeks ago tried to retaliate. They sent men to this house. We stopped them. Stopped them how? His silence was answer enough. You killed them, I said. Yes. How many? Does it matter? Yes, it matters because Riley heard something tonight. She heard violence happening in her home. Again. I moved closer to his desk. You can't protect her from your world if you keep bringing your world into her home. This is the only way I know how to protect her. Then maybe you need to learn a different way. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger maybe. Or pain. You think I haven't tried. You think I don't know what this is doing to her. Then stop. I can't. The people who want to hurt me will use anyone I care about to get to me. That includes Riley. That includes you and Mia. Then let us go. Where? Back to your apartment with the broken locks and the landlord who doesn't fix anything. Back to walking past warehouses and counting coins at the grocery store? Back to being invisible and vulnerable and alone. His words hit like physical blows. Because they were true. Because I'd been thinking the same thing for weeks. You saved my life. Dominic continued, his voice softer now. And I've brought you nothing but danger. I know that. But letting you go doesn't make you safer. It just makes you easier to find. What do you want from me? I want you to stay. I want Riley to keep laughing at the beach. I want Mia to feel safe doing her homework. He stopped, looking away. I want to not feel like I'm destroying everything I touch. I stood there, looking at this powerful, dangerous man who'd built an empire on violence and fear. And for the first time I saw past the armor. Saw the man who'd lost his sister and couldn't save her. Who'd inherited a traumatized child and didn't know how to reach her. Who'd been stabbed and left to die in an alley. And the only person who'd stopped to help was a broke single mother with no reason to trust anyone. You're not destroying everything, I said quietly. Riley's healing because of you. Because you gave her space and time and didn't force her to be okay. She's healing because of you. Not me. She's healing because she has both of us. Dominic looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Not romance. Not promises. Just understanding. Two broken people trying to protect two children in a world that wanted to hurt them. What do I do? He asked. And for the first time he sounded lost. You make a choice. You decide what kind of man you want to be for Riley. For yourself. And if I can't stop being who I am, then you find a way to keep your world away from hers. You build walls. Not just around the estate, but around the life you let her see. He nodded slowly. You'd stay. Even knowing what I am. I'd stay. For Riley. For Mia. But not for you. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Fair enough. The attack changed everything. Dominic became more careful. More deliberate. He stopped conducting business from the estate entirely, using other properties, other locations, anywhere that wouldn't bring violence close to Riley. He hired more security, not just armed men, but people who specialized in protection rather than retaliation. And he started spending time with Riley. Real time, not just dinner appearances. He taught her to play chess. Read books she chose instead of business reports. Listened when she talked about her mother without changing the subject. It was awkward at first. Years of distance couldn't be bridged in a few conversations. But Riley started to soften. Started to laugh at his terrible jokes and argue with him about astronomy versus business strategy. Started to look at him like he was her uncle instead of her guardian. Mia thrived too. The fear from that night faded as routine returned. She made friends with the gardener's daughter. Started taking piano lessons from the same teacher who'd once taught Riley. Learned to swim in the pool she'd been too scared to touch. And I found something I'd lost years ago. Purpose. Stability. A reason to wake up that wasn't just survival. But the danger never fully went away. I saw it in the way Thomas Kane checked the perimeter every morning. In the way Dominic's phone would ring at odd hours and he'd step out of the room with that cold, hard look in his eyes. In the way Riley still flinched at loud noises and Mia still sometimes asked when we were going home. We can't stay here forever, I told Dominic one evening after the girls had gone to bed. Why not? Because this isn't real life. This is a shelter. And eventually, we need to figure out how to live without shelter. What if I don't want you to leave? I looked at him. What are you saying? I'm saying that Riley is better with you here. That this house feels less like a prison when you're in it. He stopped, searching for words. I don't want to lose what we've built here. We haven't built anything. You've provided safety. I've provided care for Riley. That's not the same as building a life. Then what would building a life look like? Thought about it. About Mia's laughter and Riley's tentative smiles and the strange, careful peace we'd found in this house of violence and secrets. It would look like the truth, I said finally. No more pretending this is temporary. No more pretending you're just keeping us safe until something gets resolved. If we stay because we choose it. 'Cause we want to. Not because we're scared of what's outside these walls. And if I told you I wanted you to stay, that I wanted Riley to have someone who understood her, That I wanted Mia to have the stability you couldn't give her before. I'd say that's not enough. Because wanting us here isn't the same as being the kind of man who deserves us here. Dominic was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. You're right. The next morning, Dominic called a meeting with his senior people. I wasn't invited, but Thomas Kane told me about it afterward. Dominic had made a decision. He was stepping back from the violent side of his operations. Not abandoning them entirely. That would create a power vacuum others would fill, but delegating them. Creating distance. Building the walls I'd talked about between his world and Riley's. Some of the men aren't happy, Thomas said. They think he's going soft. Getting distracted. Are they right? Probably. But I think he's making the right choice anyway. Why? Thomas looked at me. Because Riley deserves an uncle who doesn't bring death to her doorstep. And because he knows that if he doesn't change, he'll lose you both. He doesn't have us. Doesn't he? I didn't answer. Because the truth was complicated. We weren't prisoners anymore, not really. We were something else. Something harder to name. That night, Riley asked if she could sleep in our room. Not because she was scared, but because she wanted to. We pulled out the extra mattress Helena kept in the closet and set it up next to the bed. Riley and Mia stayed up late, whispering and giggling about things only children found funny. I sat by the window, watching them, and thought about the night 3 weeks ago when I'd found a bleeding man on my steps. How everything had changed because I'd made one choice. One small, terrifying, impossible choice. Mom! Mia's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Can we stay here? Like forever? Would you want to? She nodded. Riley's my friend. And I like my piano lessons. And the pool. And Helena's cooking. What about our old apartment? Mia scrunched up her nose. It smelled bad. And it was cold. And you were always sad there. I wasn't always sad. Yes, you were. You just didn't think I noticed. She was right. I had been sad. Tired. Worn down by years of scraping by and never quite making it. What about you, Riley? Yes. Do you want us to stay? Riley looked up from her mattress. Yes, please. Even though it's crowded with us here. It's not crowded. It's. She paused, searching for the word. Full. The house feels full now. In a good way. Smiled. Then I guess we'll stay. If your uncle says it's okay. He will, Riley said with absolute certainty. He's different when you're here. Better. I didn't know if that was true. But I hoped it was. Dominic found me in the garden the next afternoon while the girls were at their lessons. Thomas said you wanted to talk, I said. I wanted to ask you something. He sat on the bench beside me, careful to keep distance between us. If I could guarantee your safety, yours and Mia's and Riley's, would you stay here? Permanently. Define permanently. Move in completely. Make this your home. Let Mia attend the private school Riley will start next year. Let me handle your debts, your bills, everything that kept you up at night in that apartment. Why would you do that? Because Riley needs you. Because I can see the difference you've made in her life. Because. He stopped. Because you make this house feel like a home instead of a fortress. And what would I be? Your employee. Your charity case. You'd be Riley's guardian. Officially. Legally. I'd set up a trust fund for both girls, separate from my business interests. Protected. They'd be taken care of no matter what happened to me. I stared at him. You're serious. I'm always serious. You want me to raise your niece. I want you to keep doing what you're already doing. The only difference is you'd have security, resources, a future. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Peace of mind. The knowledge that Riley will grow up with someone who actually knows how to love a child instead of just protecting one. I looked at him, this dangerous man who'd built an empire on violence, and saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't trying to buy me. He was trying to give his niece the one thing his money couldn't guarantee. A mother. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I ask. I thought about it for 3 days. Talked it through with Helena, who told me it was the best thing that could happen to Riley. Watched Dominic interact with his niece, saw how he looked at her when she wasn't watching, like she was the only thing in his world worth protecting. I thought about Mia, how happy she'd been these past weeks. How she'd started talking about the future instead of just surviving the present. How she'd stopped flinching at loud noises and started laughing at dinner. I thought about the apartment we'd left behind, with its broken locks and water-stained ceiling and the constant fear of being one missed paycheck away from homelessness. And I thought about Riley, who'd been drowning in her uncle's well-meaning but inadequate care for 5 years. Who'd started to heal because someone finally saw her as a child instead of a responsibility. On the 4th day I found Dominic in his study. "I'll stay," I said. "On one condition. Name it. You keep your world separate from ours. No business in the house. No violence near the girls. No compromises on their safety. Done. I'm not finished. If you break that rule, if you bring danger here again, I'm gone. And I'm taking both girls with me, consequences be damned." Something shifted in his expression. Respect maybe. Or recognition. Agreed. Then we have a deal. He stood and extended his hand. I shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This was a business arrangement. A practical solution to a complicated problem. Nothing more. But when I looked at him, I saw the faint smile at the corner of his mouth. The relief in his eyes. The way his shoulders relaxed, just slightly, like he'd been carrying a weight he could finally set down. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. Raising 2 girls is harder than running a criminal empire." He laughed. Actually he did. "I believe you." Paperwork took 2 weeks. Lawyers came and went, drawing up trusts and guardianship agreements and documents that ensured Mia and I would be protected no matter what happened to Dominic or his business interests. Thomas Kane handled most of it, explaining each document in careful detail, making sure I understood exactly what I was signing. The trust funds for both girls. The legal authority I'd have over Riley's care and education. The stipends for household expenses and personal needs. "This is a lot of money," I said, looking at the numbers. "Mr. Costello wants to ensure you never have to worry about making ends meet again." "I'm not used to not worrying." "Then consider it job training." Thomas smiled slightly. "You'll get used to it." Helena helped me move our things from the guest room into a permanent suite on the 2nd floor. Bigger space, more privacy, rooms for both girls that they could decorate however they wanted. Mia chose yellow walls and star-shaped lights. Riley chose deep blue and built-in bookshelves. They seemed like such small choices, such normal everyday decisions. But watching them paint and arrange furniture and argue about whose room was better, I realized these were the first permanent choices they'd ever made. The first time they'd been allowed to claim space as their own. "Are you happy?" I asked Mia one evening as we hung pictures on her new walls. She nodded. "This is the best room I've ever had." "It's the only room you've ever had. We always lived in studios before." "Then it's definitely the best." She hugged me, sudden and fierce. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby." "Are we really staying? Forever?" "Yes, we're really staying." "Good. Because I don't want to leave." Neither did I. And that realization, that I'd found something here I didn't want to lose, terrified and comforted me in equal measure. 3 months after we moved in permanently, Riley asked about her mother. We were in the garden, the 3 of us, when she suddenly said, "Do you think my mom would like you?" I looked up from the book I was reading. "I don't know. I never met her. She liked people who were honest, who didn't pretend things were okay when they weren't. Then maybe she would have liked me." "Uncle Dominic says you remind him of her. That you both had this way of making hard things look easy." "Nothing about this has been easy. But you did it anyway." Riley picked at the grass. "That's what my mom did too. She worked 2 jobs when I was little. She was always tired, but she never complained. She just kept going. She sounds like a strong person." She was. Until the accident. I set down my book and moved closer to Riley. Do you want to talk about the accident? I dream about it sometimes. The sound of the crash. The way the car spun. My mom screaming my name. Riley's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I was in the back seat. She was in the front. The other car hit her side. Riley. I couldn't save her. I was right there and I couldn't do anything. You were a child. It wasn't your responsibility to save her. But I should have done something. Anything. I took her hands in mine. Listen to me. Your mother's death wasn't your fault. You survived because she protected you. That's what mothers do. We protect our children no matter what. Like you protected Mia when you stayed with that bleeding man instead of calling the police. Yes, like that. Were you scared? Terrified? But you did it anyway. Because I had to. Because if I didn't, someone worse might have found him. Someone who would have asked questions or called people or put Mia in danger. Riley was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you for not running away that night. For not being too scared to help. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay after." She smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're staying." Me too. The threats never fully stopped. There were always people who wanted to test Dominic's boundaries, who saw his changes as weakness rather than evolution. But they never reached us. Dominic kept his word. He kept his world separate from ours. I'd see him sometimes late at night, standing in the garden with his phone pressed to his ear and that cold look in his eyes. The look that reminded me he wasn't just Riley's uncle or the man who'd given us safety. He was still dangerous. Still capable of things I didn't want to imagine. But he was also the man who taught Riley to play chess and listened to Mia's stories about school, and trusted me to raise his sister's daughter without interference or conditions. "Do you regret it?" Thomas Kane asked me one afternoon. Helping him that night. Sometimes. When I think about what could have happened. What almost happened. But you did it anyway. I didn't know who he was. If I had. Would you have walked away? Thought about it. About the man bleeding on the concrete steps. About my first instinct to close the curtain and pretend I saw nothing. About Mia's face, pale with fear, asking if someone was hurt. "No," I said finally. "I wouldn't have walked away. I would have helped him regardless." "Why?" "Because that's who I am. That's who my mother taught me to be." Thomas nodded. "Mr. Costello chose well. He didn't choose me. I was just there." "No. He could have gone anywhere that night. Could have made it to a dozen safe houses. But he ended up at your door. That wasn't a chance. What was it then? Fate. Luck. Whatever you want to call it." Thomas smiled slightly. "Sometimes the right person is in the right place at exactly the right time. And everything changes because of it." 2 years after that night, Mia turned 10 and Riley turned 13. We celebrated with cake on the terrace. Just the four of us. Me, Dominic, and the girls. Riley had changed so much. She smiled easily now. Talked about the future. Had friends at her new school and hobbies beyond sitting alone in her room. She was still quiet, still serious, but she was healing. Really healing. Mia had changed too. The fearful, wary child who'd hidden in our apartment while I helped a stranger had grown into a confident girl who believed the world was safe because she'd never had to prove otherwise. And Dominic. Dominic had become someone I barely recognized from that night in the alley. Still dangerous, still powerful, but with a softness around the edges that hadn't been there before. A gentleness he saved for Riley. "Was. Make a wish," I told the girls as they leaned over the cake. They closed their eyes. I didn't know what they wished for. But I knew what I wished for. More days like this. More moments of peace. More proof that the choice I'd made 2 years ago, the impossible, terrifying choice to help a bleeding stranger, had been the right one. When I looked up, Dominic was watching me. Not the girls, not the cake, but me. And in his eyes, I saw something I'd never expected to find. Gratitude. Respect. Maybe even something deeper. Thank you, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. For what? For everything. For that night. For staying. For giving Riley a life I couldn't. You gave her safety. That's not nothing. Safety isn't enough. She needed love. Family. Normal things. He paused. You gave her all of that. I looked at the girls laughing over their cake, and felt something warm and fierce bloom in my chest. They gave me those things too. And it was true. In saving Dominic Costello's life, I'd accidentally saved my own. I'd found a home, purpose, a family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice. On the choice to help when help was needed, to stay when staying was hard, to love when love seemed impossible. The danger was still there. It always would be. Men like Dominic Costello didn't leave their worlds behind. They just learned to build walls around the things they wanted to protect. But inside those walls we were safe. We were happy. We were home. And sometimes that was enough.